6 separate earthquakes struck south of Tonga in just 21 hours, and they haven't stopped. The ocean floor directly beneath that zone drops 36,089 feet, 6 miles straight down into cold darkness. Every single one of those 6 quakes hit at just 6 miles below the ocean surface 4 months ago. A magnitude 7.5 struck this same region, the strongest quake anywhere in 2026. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what a swarm like this really means. Drop your city in the comments. This swarm pattern affects coastlines a lot closer to home, starting July the 26th. The southern Pacific began shaking repeatedly near 24 degrees south latitude. 6 events, all between magnitude 5.0 and 5.2, clustered within a 25-mile radius over 21 hours. Geologists call this pattern a seismic swarm, and it demands a very different kind of attention. Today we break down what's building beneath the Tonga Trench and what history tells us to expect. To understand why this happened, y'all gotta look at what's beneath the South Pacific right now. The Tonga Trench is one of the deepest places on the entire surface of our planet. At its deepest point, the trench drops 36,089 feet, and that is not a metaphor. That's 3,000 feet deeper than Mount Everest, is tall with no light, no sound, no warning. 2 massive tectonic plates are colliding right now beneath that water every single day without stopping. The Pacific Plate drives beneath the Indo-Australian Plate at roughly 9 inches every year. Think of it like 2 giant slabs of concrete, one slowly grinding beneath the other. That process is called subduction, and it's the most powerful force driving earthquake activity on Earth. Subduction means pressure builds slowly, invisibly, for decades or even centuries at a time. When that pressure finally releases, it releases all at once, and the results can be catastrophic. Now here's where things get wild. Not all earthquakes near Tonga work the same way. This week's 6 quakes were shallow, only 6 miles below the ocean floor surface. Shallow quakes are fundamentally different from deep ones. The energy has almost nowhere to go. It's like squeezing a water balloon near the top. The release is immediate and violent. Deep quakes absorb into miles of rock before reaching the surface, weakening significantly along the way. But a quake at 6 miles depth hits the ocean floor almost immediately with full force. That's exactly why shallow ocean quakes are the primary trigger for tsunamis around the Pacific. Now here's the part that changes everything. What exactly is a seismic swarm? A swarm is not just a few aftershocks. It's a fundamentally different type of seismic behavior. In a normal earthquake sequence, one big main shock is followed by smaller aftershocks that fade. In a swarm, no single quake is clearly dominant. They cluster together with no obvious leader. Scientists debate what drives swarms' fluid movement in the crust, rising magma, or slow stress transfer. Some swarms are harmless, just the crust settling into a new shape after gradual deformation. But other swarms are foreshocks, the ground warming up before a much larger rupture follows. The hard truth, no instrument yet tells us in real time whether a swarm is a foreshock. That uncertainty is exactly why the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center monitors this zone 24 hours a day. In March 2026, this same region produced a magnitude 7.5, the strongest quake of that entire year. That 7.5 struck at 148 miles depth, deep enough that no tsunami warning was ever issued. But this week's swarm is different. All 6 events hit at just 6 miles below the surface. That's 25 times shallower than March's big quake, sitting directly in the tsunami danger zone. Let's talk energy scale here, because magnitude numbers are deeply misleading without something to compare them against. Magnitude 5.2 sounds small, but it releases energy equivalent to roughly 500 tons of TNT. Multiply that by 6 events in 21 hours and you begin to see the total stress picture. Tonga has recorded more than 30 significant seismic events at M5 or above in 2026 alone. That averages to nearly 1 significant earthquake every week in this zone just in 2026 so far. Here's what surprises most people. The broader Tonga zone averages 1 M4 plus earthquake every single day. Most are too small to feel, but this week's swarm has crossed into genuinely serious territory. Events above magnitude 5 are capable of damaging structures and disrupting life on small island communities. Now, let's look at what history tells us about seismic swarms in this part of the world. Scientists have documented silent underground movements near Tonga that load tectonic stress without any felt shaking. These slow slip events can precede major earthquakes by weeks or even months, building invisible pressure. This current swarm may be the surface expression of exactly that kind of invisible stress loading process. Here's what makes the timing significant. This region already holds a magnitude 8.0 in its geological record. The strongest earthquake near Tonga in recorded modern history was a magnitude 8.0 striking in May 2006. That 2006 event struck 96 miles southwest of Nuku'alofa and put tsunami warnings across the South Pacific. Now let's talk about what this seismic activity actually means for real human communities in the region. Tonga is a small island nation of roughly 100,000 people, most living close to the coast. When the magnitude 7.5 struck in March 2026, shaking was felt across multiple island groups throughout Tonga. No major damage was reported, but that outcome was largely a matter of depth and luck. This week's 6 quakes produced no confirmed injuries or structural damage based on available monitoring reports. But here's what those numbers don't capture: the psychological weight of repeated shaking with no warning. 6 earthquakes in 21 hours strains emergency systems in ways that a single larger quake never does. Tonga's memory of catastrophe is also tied deeply to the January 2022 Hunga Tonga volcanic eruption. That eruption produced a shock wave that circled the entire planet more than twice recorded on instruments worldwide. The disaster destroyed nearly 600 homes and severed Tonga's communications with the outside world for days. That context matters. Tonga residents are not strangers to life-altering seismic and volcanic events. Now let's zoom out to the broader seismic picture across the Pacific this week. On June 8th of this year, a magnitude 7.8 struck the southern Philippines just 7 weeks ago. The quake killed at least 106 people. Injured? From which 316 and triggered tsunami waves along Mindanao's southern coast. FIVOLCs recorded more than 8,500 aftershocks in the weeks following that Philippine event, and they're still coming. The M5.3 this week near Kinablangan in the Philippines is likely one of those delayed aftershocks. Aftershock sequences from major earthquakes routinely continue for weeks or months, sometimes extending well into years. Meanwhile, a separate M5.4 struck Chile this week, 82 miles southwest of San Pedro de Atacama. At 66 miles depth, it generated noticeable shaking felt by approximately 150,000 residents near Calama. Chile. Chile sits on the Nazca subduction zone, the same system that produced Earth's largest ever recorded earthquake. We covered that 1960 Valdivia disaster in an earlier Earth Unraveled episode. The numbers were almost unimaginable. Vanuatu recorded its own M5.0 this week, a direct aftershock from the M6.0 just days before. All of these events paint a connected picture of pressure building across the Ring of Fire. The Ring of Fire generates roughly 90% of all earthquakes on Earth every single year. Every zone in today's data: Tonga, Philippines, Chile. Vanuatu sits directly on that same ring. These nations are not experiencing isolated events. They are nodes in one single connected tectonic system. When one segment of that ring releases stress, neighboring fault zones often take on additional loading. Scientists call this Coulomb stress transfer. Pressure moves like water through connected underground fault networks. Think of squeezing one end of a tube of toothpaste. The pressure has to go somewhere. Right now, geologists are watching a zone much closer to home with exactly that level of attention. Let's look at which fault zones scientists in the United States are monitoring most closely right now. The Pacific Northwest sits directly above the Cascadia subduction zone, America's own version of this exact threat. The Juan de Fuca plate is diving beneath North America at roughly 1.4 inches every year. That's the same fundamental process we've been describing beneath Tonga, just in America's backyard. Cities directly above the Cascadia zone include Seattle, Portland, and Victoria, home to millions of people. Cascadia geological records show a pattern of M9.0, or greater events, roughly every 200 to 500 years. The last full Cascadia rupture was January 26th in 1700, meaning 325 years of stress have since accumulated. That 1700 rupture sent tsunami waves across the Pacific, devastating coastal villages as far away as Japan. FEMA estimates a full Cascadia rupture could produce 13,000 deaths and 27,000 injuries on day one alone. That's not science fiction, that's the official Federal Emergency Planning estimate currently on the books. But the Pacific Northwest is not the only American zone demanding attention after a week like this. Southern California sits above the San Andreas Fault, one of the most studied fault systems on Earth. Los Angeles, San Bernardino, and Long Beach all sit within rupture distance of the San Andreas system. Y'all watching from Seattle, LA, Portland, or anywhere on the Pacific coast, drop your city below. Hawaii faces a uniquely dangerous position, surrounded on all sides by active Ring of Fire fault systems. Tsunami waves from a Tonga region M8.0 would reach Hawaii in roughly 5 hours after the rupture. When Chile's 1960 M9.5 struck, tsunami waves reached Hilo Bay, Hawaii, killing 61 people who didn't evacuate. Hilo's lesson is the same one seismologists repeat after every swarm like Tonga's early evacuation saves lives. Let's look inland now, because the New Madrid seismic zone in America's interior also demands your attention. New Madrid sits under Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Kentucky, the hidden seismic threat of America's heartland. Between 1811 and 1812, New Madrid produced 3 separate events estimated between magnitude 7.0 and 8.0. Those events were so powerful, they temporarily reversed the flow of the Mississippi River for several hours. Memphis, St. Louis, and Nashville all lie within the damage zone of a major New Madrid event. Unlike West Coast cities, most central U.S. buildings were never designed to withstand serious seismic shaking. Swarm patterns like Tonga's can represent harmless settling or a buildup towards something significantly larger. That's precisely why monitoring agencies like USGS and PTWC do not stand down after a swarm ends. The 30-day window following an unusual swarm is considered the highest vigilance period in seismic monitoring practice. Here's what that vigilance looks like. Stations across the Pacific record microseismic activity around the clock. GPS satellites measure ground deformation at millimeter scale, detecting invisible plate movements before any earthquake occurs. Buoy networks across the Pacific can detect a tsunami wave barely an inch tall in open ocean. That technology stands between a seismic event and the millions of people living on coastlines worldwide. Those systems exist specifically because of swarm events and sudden ruptures from zones exactly like Tonga's. Here's something most people don't realize. The United States operates 39 DART buoys across the Pacific. DART stands for Deep Ocean Assessment and Reporting of Tsunamis, delivering real-time wave data to emergency managers. If a rupture, like a Tonga M8.0, occurred today, DART stations would detect the wave within minutes. Hawaii, Oregon, Washington, and California could receive coastal evacuation orders within 20 to 30 minutes of detection. That warning window is narrow, which is exactly why preparation matters more than any warning system alone. We've seen what happens when communities are prepared, and we've seen what happens when they're not. Japan's 2011 Tohoku tsunami killed nearly 20,000 people, but prepared coastal towns saw dramatically lower casualty rates. The difference between those towns was not luck, it was years of drills, signage, and community planning. Now, let's get practical, because awareness without action is just anxiety with a YouTube soundtrack. Here's what you can do today, based specifically on what we learned from this week's events. Tip 1, download the NOAA Weather Radio app and enable all coastal hazard and tsunami alerts. These apps draw direct data feeds from the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center and the National Weather Service. Tip 2, if you live near the coast, find and memorize your official tsunami evacuation route today. Most coastal counties in California, Oregon, and Washington post official tsunami hazard zone maps on emergency websites. Tip 3, build or update a 72-hour kit with water, a hand crank radio, and first aid supplies. Tip 4, register for your county's emergency text alerts. Most signups take under 2 minutes online. Tip 5, during shaking, drop under a solid table, cover your head, and hold on tight. Do not run outdoors during active shaking. Falling glass and debris cause the majority of earthquake injuries. After shaking stops near a coastline, don't wait for an official warning move to higher ground immediately. Natural tsunami warnings include violent shaking, ocean water pulling back rapidly, or a loud roaring sound. If you see any of those signs, move immediately and do not wait for any official notification. Now let's look at the country that has gotten earthquake preparation right better than almost anyone else. Chile, which had its own M5.4 this week, is arguably the world's best earthquake-prepared nation today. After the 2010 MAL M8.8, Chile overhauled its entire building code, warning system, and coastal evacuation infrastructure. Chile's 2014 Iquique M8.2 triggered a tsunami warning, and upgraded systems helped evacuate nearly 900,000 people safely. That result didn't happen by accident. It was 4 years of investment, community drills, and coastal education. Japan's early warning system provides up to 80 seconds of alert time before shaking even begins. The U.S. Shake Alert system now covers the West Coast, delivering automatic warnings through smartphones before shaking arrives. Even 15 seconds of warning can stop machinery, clear elevators, and get people safely to cover. This week's swarm reminds us that the ring of fire doesn't wait for anyone to feel ready. 6 earthquakes in 21 hours, that's the documented pattern before several significant events in seismic history. Whether this swarm ends quietly or builds larger, preparation remains the only answer science can offer. If this opened your eyes, share it with someone near a coast or fault they need it. Stay alert, stay informed, stay prepared, because this earth never asks whether you're ready before it moves.